Our culture is constantly making us these two huge promises. First, that a good life is a happy one, totally free from pain and regret. And second, that science has the answer to basically every important question we could ever ask. But what if those simple answers aren't just wrong? What if they're actually holding us back from living a fuller, more courageous life? That's exactly what we're going to get into today.
So let's just start with a question that kind of flips our whole idea of happiness on its head. I mean, we're all taught to avoid pain, right? To see it as a failure or something to be fixed. But what if it's not an obstacle to a meaningful life? What if it's the very foundation of one?
And then there's this other massive idea. We put so much faith in science to give us concrete, certain answers. But what happens when that faith turns into an ideology, a belief system that basically says it has a monopoly on all knowledge that's actually worth having? What's fascinating is that both of these questions, they point to the same deep desire in our world today. We are hungry for simple, clean formulas. We want a clear roadmap to happiness and a single, foolproof source for truth. Anything to escape the beautiful, complicated mess of just being human. So, let's break this down. We're really tackling two huge cultural myths here. On one side, you've got the dream of a painless, regret-free existence. And on the other, the belief that science and only science can solve every problem that matters. Now, as you're about to see, both of these ideas promise us certainty, but they might just be robbing us of something way more valuable. All right, let's dive into that first dream, the painless life. The biggest hurdle, of course, is regret. But the thinking we're drawing on today reframes it completely. It suggests regret isn't some mistake that we need to fix, it's the price we pay for the freedom to choose in the first place. And check out this quote from the poet Ahmad Shamloo. It just sets the stage so perfectly. It suggests that pain isn't some random accident that happens to us. No, it's the very first stone in the foundation of who we become. This right here, this is a powerful way to look at it. Regret isn't a bug in our system. It's not a sign you messed up. It's an existential condition. It's the ghost of the lives we didn't live, the shadow that's cast simply because we have the power to make choices. It's inescapable. And this gets to the absolute core of the argument. Every single time we make a big, meaningful choice, every time we say yes to one path, we are, by definition, saying no to a million other possibilities. There's just no way around that. This visual really captures that internal tug of war, doesn't it? We live out one single path, but our minds are fully aware of all those other paths we could have taken. And regret is born right there, in that gap between the life we have and the infinite other versions of ourselves that could have been. Let's make this real. I mean, just look at these examples. Every single one is a good, valid choice. You can choose career independence, but maybe sacrifice some intimacy. You can choose to build a family, and your personal autonomy might shrink a bit. Neither choice is wrong, but both come with a cost, an unavoidable potential for regret. Now, you might be thinking, what about therapy, like CBT or ACT? And you're right, those tools are incredibly valuable. They help us manage discomfort and act on our values. But here's the thing, what they can't do is get rid of that fundamental existential ache of what if. They help us learn to carry the weight, not pretend the weight doesn't exist. So this all leads to a pretty mind-blowing realization. Maybe we've been looking at happiness all wrong. It isn't found in a life without pain. Real, authentic happiness, the kind that actually sticks, it emerges from navigating those meaningful struggles and making tough choices. Pain is the very soil it grows in. And that very same desire for a simple path, that need to escape struggle, well, that brings us right to our second myth, the idea that science can solve everything. This belief is often called scientism, and it's really just another attempt to find one single, clean answer to all of life's complexities. So, what exactly is scientism? It's so important we get this right. Science is a method, a process. Scientism, on the other hand, is a philosophical claim. It's the belief that the scientific method is the only valid path to knowledge for any question that really matters. But here's the problem, and it's a big one. Philosophers call it the demarcation problem. If you're going to claim that science is the only source of truth, you first have to draw a really clear, sharp line around what is and what is not science. And trust me, that is way harder than it sounds. Let's use this fantastic example from our source material. You know, the local shops close at 7 p.m. That's a fact. It's a justified, true belief. It's knowledge. But
Did you use the scientific method to figure that out? Did you run a controlled experiment with a hypothesis? Of course not.
So if you try to get around this by defining science really broadly, like just rational inquiry, then figuring out store hours suddenly becomes science. So does learning to play the piano or baking a cake. The word becomes so broad that it's basically meaningless. We'd have to invent a whole new word just for physics and chemistry.
Okay, so this is the real gotcha moment. Let's walk through the logic. 1. Scientism's whole argument depends on having a clear definition of science. 2. The actual act of defining what science is? Well, that's a philosophical task, not a scientific one. You can't put that question in a test tube. 3. Therefore, scientism has to rely on philosophy to even make its own case, the very thing it so often dismisses.
And that brings us to this powerful conclusion. The statement, "only science can give us truth," is not a scientific statement. It's a philosophical one. And because of that, it's self-refuting. It's basically a snake eating its own tail.
So where does all this leave us? We've poked holes in the myth of a painless life and the myth of an all-knowing science. Let's try and bring it all together and see what we actually gain when we let go of these simple answers.
Look at how these two ideas are really just two sides of the same coin. They are both about escaping the hard parts of being human. One tries to get rid of emotional pain and uncertainty. The other tries to get rid of intellectual and moral messiness. Both are selling a formula for a world that's a lot simpler than the one we actually live in.
But what happens when we stop running? What do we get when we finally embrace all that complexity? Well, we find a happiness that's actually authentic because it's been tested. We find the existential courage to make choices, knowing that regret is just part of the deal. We find meaning, not by avoiding the struggle, but by facing it head-on. We find the freedom to be fully, messily, and courageously human.
And honestly, that feels like the perfect thought to leave you with. Maybe real courage isn't about finding all the right answers that make pain and doubt disappear. Maybe it's about having the strength to live with the questions, to know that pain is going to come, and to make the choice to walk forward anyway.